there comes a point where, again, going back to the relationship between certain members of the family and the tabloid press.
The sheer audacity was almost impossible to ignore. That's how one senior palace aide described the moment King Charles III received a formal, tension-laden letter from his estranged son, Prince Harry, on the chilly morning of December 28, 2025. From the first line, it was obvious. This wasn't a request. It was a high-stakes demand that instantly set the palace on edge. In the letter, the Duke of Sussex laid out what he called an urgent financial transition and requested an immediate sum of £100 million, citing pressing logistical burdens tied to reintegration into royal duties. But it wasn't the size of the sum that stunned the monarch. It was the tone, the demanding conditions, and the subtle threat running beneath every sentence. Sources now confirm that Prince Harry is drowning in debt, and for the first time in history, the British monarchy refused to throw him a lifeline. Royal insiders described the letter as entitled, vague, and veiled in leverage. Not only was it returned the same day, but it also prompted King Charles to order a full forensic financial investigation into Harry and Meghan's post-royal finances. The numbers that emerged are staggering. $65 million in liabilities, £11.3 million still owed on the Montecito estate, $28 million in accumulated legal costs spanning privacy lawsuits, security challenges and failed libel suits. Private armed security expenses since 2020 alone reached $31 million, and losses tied to underperforming media contracts with Netflix and Spotify reached $26 million, including the collapse of Meghan's Archetypes podcast and multiple unreleased documentary projects. Essentially, he was asking for a royal bailout, but he couched it in the language of strategic reintegration, as if the monarchy owed him a path back, said one palace source. The letter, dated December 28th and titled Reintegration Framework and Financial Transition Support Request, didn't arrive via the normal diplomatic pouch or royal courier. Instead, it was delivered by Meghan's Los Angeles-based legal firm, escalating tension immediately. The document, marked time-sensitive, demanded £100 million to be transferred within 15 working days into 3 separate accounts: a Delaware LLC, a Cayman Islands trustee service, and a Beverly Hills real estate escrow handler. There were no direct deposits into personal or arching accounts. The letter avoided explicitly mentioning debt or bankruptcy, instead including vague justifications under essential reintegration infrastructure, citing school transitions for Archie and Lilette, estimated £950,000, relocation consultancy and housing shift fees, £2.3 million for private health insurance upgrades to meet UK compliance, £480,000 for residential staff onboarding and security clearances, and an undisclosed sum for brand equity re-establishment. One former royal aide described it as equal parts emotional ransom and corporate invoice. Harry wasn't asking for help. He was issuing demands. Sources say the king's reaction was swift and ferocious. A palace messenger returned the letter the same day, unopened beyond the first page, with a personal note attached. This family does not respond to conditions you send when you have nothing to negotiate. According to multiple insiders, Charles had previously left the door open for a quiet, humble return, without press, without drama. But Harry's transactional approach hit a nerve. He didn't come back to atone, he came back to bargain, a longtime aide said. That, they confirmed, was the breaking point. Sir Michael Stevens, keeper of the Privy Purse, was immediately ordered to conduct a full audit. I need every penny traced, down to the last shilling. The audit would reveal the full scale of the Sussex financial crisis and clarify why Harry's request wasn't simply rejected, it was blacklisted. Within hours, the letter was forwarded to Prince William. His reaction, disbelief, then resolve. Sources say William had insisted on total financial severance since early 2025, after Sussex allies leaked private texts amid an ongoing rift. Princess Anne, often emotionally distant but operationally sharp, reportedly told the king that Harry's proposal amounted to extortion in royal language. She reportedly said, "Debt is not our inheritance to pay." Surprisingly, Queen Camilla voiced caution, urging Charles to consider the children and avoid letting financial humiliation become a generational feud. But her warnings were largely drowned out by palace fury. The timing of the letter coincided with escalating rumours from California. By mid-December 2025, multiple ex-staffers from Archwell contacted Los Angeles law firms over unpaid salaries. At least 5 private contractors, including a former head of security and 2 chefs, had filed civil claims. Credit card companies also sought asset seizures through LA courts. Observers noted Meghan's December 20th holiday podcast appearance revealed visible distress, constant fidgeting, quivering voice, and unusual pauses. Sources claim she received a threatening letter from creditors just hours before filming. By the dawn of December 29th, the King's directive was clear: a full financial audit of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's post-royal expenditures. Led by Sir Michael Stevens, the investigation became one of the most aggressive in modern royal history. Over the next 72 hours, the audit unearthed shocking findings. Presented behind closed doors on January 2nd, 2026, the results were damning. £150 million in liabilities, far beyond the £100 million Harry had vaguely referenced. The audit revealed not just failed investments or overspending, but a consistent pattern of financial mismanagement, misdirection, and deliberate obfuscation. This isn't just insolvency, Sir Michael reportedly said. It's misdirection, entitlement, and desperation stitched together into the centerpiece of their American dream. The Montecito mansion, purchased in 2020 for $14.65 million US, roughly £11.5 million, had turned into a gilded financial trap. With a low equity down payment and a private mortgage through a California hedge fund, the Sussexes still owed over £11.3 million, with interest ballooning to 7.2% amid rising US rates. Annual property taxes alone exceed £210,000, while estate maintenance, landscaping, and security burn through another £800,000 each year. Selling the property would trigger loan acceleration clauses, demanding full repayment within 90 days. Harry had filed over 15 lawsuits since 2020, including actions against the Home Office for police protection, multiple UK libel cases, trademark disputes, and Netflix arbitration over contractual underperformance. Legal expenses reached £22 million, with over £9 million lost outright, plus additional penalties and opposing legal fees. Many campaigns were funded by unsecured credit, relying on anticipated royal revenue that never materialised. Since stepping back from royal duties, Harry maintained a near-military private security network. Over £31 million were spent on rotating teams of former Navy SEALs, armoured SUVs leased through Arch Oil Holdings, estate counter-surveillance, international travel, chartered jets, and decoy operations. He's living a head-of-state lifestyle on an influencer's income stream, one analyst said. None of it was sustainable. Many contractors remained unpaid for over 6 months. The Netflix deal, initially reported as $100 million US, delivered under $30 million in reality, most spent on a now-defunct production team and scrapped projects. Spotify's Archetypes podcast collapsed after just 12 episodes, with executive Bill Simmons publicly calling the project a flop. Combined with net streaming losses of £21 million and $5 million in contractual advances owed, the Sussexes were far from solvent. The palace also uncovered £360,000 in unpaid Archwell salaries, £88,000 owed to 3 nannies, £142,000 to bodyguards, and £3.8 million in luxury lifestyle purchases. In total, over 18 staffers, from chauffeurs to stylists, attempted legal collections since August 2025, but were met with silence. Meghan's December 20th podcast broadcast reflected the stress. Anxious, subdued, and distracted, this wasn't just about debt anymore. It exposed a fragile, borrowed life propped up by prestige. For King Charles, it confirmed the worst. Harry was no longer just a wayward royal. He had become a sinking enterprise. And just after 8 p.m. on January 3rd, 2026, 4 unmarked black Range Rovers quietly pulled into the side entrance of St James's Palace. No lights, no cameras, no official summons. Only 4 names appeared on the heavily redacted internal schedule: King Charles III, Prince William, Princess Anne, and Sir Michael Stevens. The meeting was set in the Oak Room, a place steeped in centuries of political gravity, where historic foreign treaties had been meticulously inked and where Charles had once convened his Privy Council before ascending the throne. The grandeur of the room contrasted sharply with the urgency that now hung over it like a storm cloud, heavy and unavoidable. Tonight, diplomacy had no place here. Tonight, the discussion was not about alliances, protocols, or ceremonies. It was about containment, survival, and the slow, creeping rot of one family member's financial recklessness, threatening the entire monarchy. "This is no longer a family crisis," Sir Michael opened, his voice measured but edged with steel. "This is a fiscal contagion, an active threat, and it sits at the centre of this mahogany table." He slid a thick black dossier across the polished surface, the Sussex Financial Liability Assessment, 174 pages of painstakingly compiled evidence, numbers, and internal commentary. The document laid bare over £150 million in liabilities, unserviceable debt, credibility erosion, and potential reputational catastrophes. Yet for all its charts, tables, and spreadsheets, none of it compared to the single spark that had ignited this storm: the letter itself. King Charles had spent days in agonizing deliberation, caught between the instincts of a father and the imperatives of a sovereign. The figures left no room for sentiment. Sources report that he reread Harry's letter 3 separate times before finally convening this clandestine meeting. The part that lingered in his mind, the part that gnawed at him relentlessly, was not the £100 million figure. It was not the cryptically listed Cayman Islands account numbers, nor the itemised list of supposed essential reintegration costs. It was a single, seemingly innocuous line, buried halfway down page 2. "The effectiveness of this reintegration will depend on timely financial accommodations being secured," Charles reportedly murmured to himself, a mixture of disbelief and anger. "He speaks like a contractor, not a son." The phrase, so cold and transactional, shattered any remaining paternal tolerance. With a deep, deliberate breath, he gave Sir Michael the unspoken signal: "Proceed." Stevens began his methodical presentation, his fingers tracing columns of figures, case notes, and risk analyses. He enumerated the threats to the monarchy, implied liability to global lenders, who assumed the palace would cover Harry's financial shortfalls, putting the institution itself at risk. Unpaid vendors threatening to publicise private royal data, reputational exposure that could frame the Crown as cruel or complicit should it refuse to cover Harry's debts. And then, the warning that punctured the room with a cold precision: Harry's request to wire £100 million to 3 obscure, unrelated entities, none under his name, hinted at either deliberate liability laundering or a willful evasion of personal responsibility. A heavy silence followed. Prince William, seated with arms crossed, had been quiet through the entire data presentation, watching each slide, each number, each damning note. But once strategic options were placed on the table, he leaned forward, breaking the stillness. "Let's be very clear," William said, his voice low, precise, each word weighted with the authority of a man now in command of the Crown's operational finances. "This is not about helping Harry. This is about deciding whether we finance our own collapse." He retrieved a slim folder from the polished oak and placed it on the table. A legal opinion drafted by Duchy Council titled "Termination of Financial Contingency Protocols for Former Working Royals." It had been prepared the night Harry's letter arrived, a preemptive shield ready before a single royal reply could be uttered. "I control the revenues that once supported him," William continued. "I will not authorise a single pound to subsidise a lifestyle built entirely on grievance." He then catalogued previous instances where compassion had been exploited. The Oprah interview in March 2021, aired just days after a private reconciliation dinner. The Netflix docuseries in 2022, released after Charles had extended a Christmas olive branch, and the Spare memoir of 2023, which broke confidences despite an agreed truce. Every time we show compassion, it becomes monetized. Every act of grace becomes a product. he said, voice resonating through the room. Then, like a final hammer, he added, "He hasn't just burned the bridges. He's built toll booths on them." Princess Anne, known for her cold clarity and near-military dedication to duty, delivered her verdict next. She was blunt, unsentimental, and merciless. "He's not requesting aid," she said, her voice steady and unflinching. "He is setting terms. This is not a return. It is an infiltration." Flipping the dossier to the security expenditures, she pointed out a staggering £6 million per year spent on private security in one of the safest communities in America. "All justified by fear," she said. "And now he wants us to fund that fear, to validate it. The monarchy is a ship of state. If one man insists on drilling holes into its hull, you do not hand him the tools. You remove him before he sinks it." Only one voice had once advocated for a gentler path. Queen Camilla, absent from the room, had privately expressed concern the night before. "Not for Harry," she whispered to Charles, "but for Archie and Lilette. They're still family. He's desperate. We must at least hear him." But her caution was interwoven with politics. Camilla understood that Harry's presence, chaotic as it was, acted as a counterbalance to William's growing institutional authority. Harry's disorder was inconvenient, but, in her eyes, useful. Midnight passed. Charles remained unmoved. The verdict was unanimous. No bailout, no conditional return, no further negotiations. What followed would be quietly codified within the palace as the Windsor Cutoff. There were no announcements, no press releases, no televised statements, no ceremonial rebukes. The Crown did what it did best in the face of internal rot. It closed the gates, methodically, silently, absolutely. By January 4th, 2026, the internal document known as the St. James Protocol was formally approved and enacted. Drafted under Sir Michael Stevens's supervision, signed by King Charles III and Prince William, and witnessed by Princess Anne, it was a clinical, three-clause surgical strike severing every remaining financial tether between Harry and the Crown. No theatrics, no emotions, just institutional precision. Clause 1 was simple yet devastating. No financial resources, direct, indirect, contingent, or implied, would be extended to the Duke of Sussex or any proxy acting on his behalf. It revoked access to all shared trusts, including minor legacy funds quietly maintained for Harry since Diana's passing. Preferred lender status was rescinded, security and housing reimbursements terminated. In effect, Harry was transformed from a protected royal into a private citizen. "We are not closing the Bank of Poor," William noted during final review. "We are deleting the account." Clause 2 rippled outward with financial consequences. All favourable loans, credit lines and advances Harry had secured under the assumption of royal backing were now scrutinised. Letters went to Barclays Private Bank, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America Wealth Management and others, declaring explicitly, "The Crown provides no guarantees for the Duke of Sussex effective immediately." Overnight, lenders downgraded his creditworthiness, reassessed mortgages, and called in clauses previously dormant. Analysts observed, he was rich because he was royal. Now he's just a man with a famous surname and a stack of overdue bills. Clause 3 was surgical in its cruelty. All internal royal communications regarding finances were blocked. Any emails or letters redirected automatically to external legal counsel. Personal appeals, once guaranteed audience at Clarence House, Buckingham Palace, or the Duchy of Cornwall, would receive only standardised legal refusals. Harry's lifeline to the palace was quietly severed. Even another letter would never reach Charles or William. He didn't just lose the money, one aide observed. He lost the privilege of asking. Back in California, January 5th dawned like any other morning, but Harry's financial world was collapsing. At 9:22 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, his business manager attempted a routine inquiry with a senior account officer at KTZ London. The reply was curt. "We no longer have a working relationship under royal terms. Please be advised." At 11:03 a.m., an assistant tried to confirm a mortgage extension with Montecito lenders. Response: "Your file is under review due to updated guarantor status." By 2:17 p.m., Harry himself dialed a familiar number at Clarence House, a connection from boyhood. One ring, deadline. Seconds later, an email arrived from external counsel. All inquiries must be submitted formally. Further outreach would not be acknowledged. The doors had closed permanently. The final blow came that evening, a legal notice from the palace's external attorneys. Subject line: denial of financial support and request for reimbursement. The message contained two parts: confirmation that the £100 million request was rejected in full, and an invoice for £3.6 million in unpaid costs, tied to Frogmore Cottage renovations, unreimbursed security, and arch-adjacent staff deployments. Harry read the notice in silence, then reportedly walked out onto the Montecito terrace and sat motionless for over an hour for the first time. By the 6th of January, 2026, the silence inside the Sussex household was more telling than any public statement. There were no press conferences, no carefully staged Instagram posts, no podcast uploads. Only avoidance and a growing sense of finality. Every corner of the Montecito estate seemed to echo with absence, the air heavy with tension, the rooms once filled with laughter now muted, almost reverent in their emptiness. Staff whispered in corridors. Dogs paced more nervously than usual. Even the birds seemed hesitant to approach the gardens. This was not just a household in retreat, it was a fortress holding its breath. But behind closed doors, the fallout from the St. James Protocol was anything but quiet. Chaos brewed in London as the walls of royal protocol were reinforced with iron. The divide inside Buckingham Palace was no longer a rift. It had become an impenetrable border, one that only the most senior aides could navigate, and even they tread carefully. Queen Camilla was reportedly the only senior royal making a case for one last bridge. Insiders described her as visibly distressed, torn between maternal instinct and the cold calculus of palace politics. She walked the halls of Clarence House like a strategist laying siege to her own heart, weighing each argument, each potential consequence. During a private meeting with King Charles on January 6th, she urged him to reconsider, not for the adults involved, but for the children. "There's still Windsor blood," she said, her tone a mix of maternal warmth and political precision. Archie and Lilibet shouldn't carry the weight of this exile. But Charles, steeled by the preceding week's meetings and the advice of William, Anne, and Sir Michael Stevens, had grown impervious to sentiment. He replied coldly, almost mechanically. He had his window, and he slammed it shut, attaching a price tag that would echo across continents. Camilla's fears, while emotional on the surface, were also strategic. Some palace aides quietly believed she saw Harry's re-entry as a counterbalance to William's growing institutional authority, a way to subtly influence succession dynamics and maintain a presence in the narrative. Charles's resolve had crystallized into doctrine. The monarchy must not reward disloyalty with rescue in California. Meghan's reaction, according to multiple sources, was split between panic and recalibration. Upon learning of the protocol's enactment and the palace's repayment demands, she reportedly contacted several legal teams to explore the rare option of invoking diplomatic immunity tied to past royal duties. Desperate, she also attempted to revive previous Netflix contacts, aiming to fast-track a new documentary featuring a redemption arc. At least 2 UK journalists were approached about a truth interview, though neither outlet confirmed interest. The combination of legal manoeuvring and media strategy suggested a plan fueled by urgency, but also by frustration, desperation, and a lingering sense of entitlement. The most telling moment, however, was not in legal filings or production meetings. On January 7th, Meghan appeared publicly at a live-streamed charity gala. Observers immediately noted trembling hands, a vagueness in speech unusual for her public appearances, and brief pauses that suggested internal recalculation. She spoke of responsibility and private hardship, but her words often felt rehearsed, clipped, as if the teleprompter had malfunctioned and she were reading in a vacuum. Online commentators dissected her gestures with fervour. Some noted she looked like someone reading off a blank teleprompter. Others suggested she seemed caught between performance and personal crisis. Rumours swirled that just hours before the event, a Montecito process server attempted to deliver a creditor lawsuit over unpaid design work connected to an Archwell-adjacent brand campaign. Harry, once the impassioned, fearless rebel prince, now faced the mundane terror of American litigation and mounting interest charges. By January 8th, 3 US lenders had adjusted his credit risk category, and at least one Montecito lender initiated default escalation. Former staffers posted online that armed security contractors had not been paid since September 2025, leaving serious gaps in the protection of the family. In private calls, Harry reportedly begged for armed protection, citing escalating threats from disgruntled creditors and deranged online stalkers. A stark contrast to the global diplomacy he once commanded as a royal. But Charles's message was unwavering. If Harry chooses private life, he must fund private protection himself. The British government confirmed it would not reinstate Metropolitan Police protection for Sussex family visits to the UK. At a quiet briefing inside Clarence House, Prince William addressed senior royal advisers regarding the Sussex situation. He made no effort to soften his stance. "This isn't a family issue anymore," he reportedly said. "It's an institutional threat." He warned that any reversal of the Street James Protocol would send a clear message that emotional blackmail could overturn royal policy. That failure, he explained, could be leveraged to gain access, influence, or resources. Truth no longer mattered in the calculation. Only precedent did. One phrase from William reportedly drew murmurs across the table. Every act of kindness becomes a chapter in the next memoir. His final directive was sharp, strategic, and chilling. No money, no access, no platform. If Charles was angry, William was surgical. Princess Anne, as always, was ice. On January 9th, she delivered a private but scathing note to Charles, later shared among senior staff, containing a single paragraph that summed up the institutional view. The monarchy does not run on emotion. "We are not in the business of sentimental investments." Harry returns not with humility, but with invoices. "This isn't repentance. It's negotiation cloaked in nostalgia. I refuse to fund treason by another name." She also quietly issued directives to all her charities and military associations. No Sussex involvement. No Sussex endorsements, no Sussex appearances. For now, the British public remained unaware of the full details of the £150 million scandal, though whispers were spreading. Insider leaks to tabloid journalists hinted at denied royal requests involving offshore accounts, debt spirals, lost security clearances, and stalled project financing painted a picture of mounting pressure and isolation for the Sussexes. News programmes speculated on Meghan's sudden media silence, while online royal watchers dissected every nuance of facial expressions and body language. Yet the complete truth had not yet been publicly revealed. That was about to change. At 6:01 a.m. on January 11th, 2026, a quiet but unmistakable shift occurred. The story broke, not on social media, nor in a salacious tabloid, but in the respected pages of the Times of London. The headline was simple yet chilling. "Palace rebuffs £100 million request from Duke of Sussex amid financial audit." Signed by a veteran royal correspondent, long trusted by the institution, the article confirmed what had only been whispered until now. Prince Harry had formally requested financial support from King Charles III, citing pressing transition expenses for a return to royal duties. The request was rejected. Within hours, BBC, Sky News, and CNN amplified the story, igniting global attention. The palace's full financial investigation revealed staggering figures: £11.3 million Montecito mortgage, £31 million property liabilities, £22 million security costs, £26 million legal fees, £3.6 million streaming losses, £3.8 million unpaid royal reimbursements, and £750,000 in lifestyle debts, totaling £150 million with no viable repayment plan. Analysts dissected the details, highlighting that 3 payment instructions in Harry's letter were sent to entities unconnected to him, triggering legal and ethical speculation, including possible debt laundering. Conservative media outlets condemned him for attempting to ransom his return. Liberal outlets, while more measured, could not ignore the raw numbers. Public perception shifted dramatically. Polls conducted within 24 hours showed that 68% of UK respondents supported the palace's decision, 54% now viewed Harry as a self-made liability, and only 22% believed he and Meghan should ever return to royal duties. One British mother told ITV, "He had the world and he threw it away. Now he wants to be paid to pick it back up." Veterans from Harry's Invictus Games programme reflected on the audacity of it all, leaving privilege behind, only to attempt monetised reintegration, a stark reversal of the once-beloved rebel narrative. As the days unfolded, Meghan cancelled a January 12th podcast appearance, citing unforeseen personal matters. Sources revealed she had fired her longtime PR consultant, retained a crisis manager, drafted legal letters, and even explored relocating the family to South Africa or Portugal to reframe the narrative. Yet, despite these efforts, the optics were irreversible. She had transitioned from the TIG to the invoice, a symbolic and public transformation noted by global media observers. On the night of January 11th, Harry sent one final desperate message. Not through legal counsel, but via a trusted back-channel palace aide. "I will return quietly with my family. No cameras, no interviews, just a clean start. Please, I need help." The aide forwarded it to Prince William, who was in a late briefing. William reportedly stared at the screen before quietly returning the phone. "It's not the cameras that worry me," he said. "It's the silence between scandals." He declined to respond. On January 12th, King Charles III released an official note, impersonal, formal, and deliberate. It did not name Harry, nor mention any figures. The message was clear. Service to the monarchy is not a commodity to be purchased or leased. It is a calling, not an invoice. When asked if he would reconsider, the king simply stated, "We are not a bank. We are a family. And sometimes even family must let go." Inside the palace, this marked the end of royal amnesty. No royal may now trade return for funding, cite security threats to bypass fiscal policy, or present personal failure as institutional obligation. For Harry, the door was not merely closed, it had been brick shut. Montecito remained under mounting financial and legal pressure, their staff reduced to a skeleton crew, estates quietly evaluated for sale, book deals stalled, Netflix and Spotify contracts severed. Silence reigned, punctuated only by the growing echo of consequence. Once protected by legacy, now swallowed by liability, the Sussex story had entered a new chapter, one defined by solitude, accountability, and the unflinching glare of public scrutiny. If you want to follow every unfolding twist of the royal saga, the financial fallout, and the personal battles behind the palace doors, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We're tracking every development, from Montecito to London, and bringing you the story as it happens. No shortcuts, no filters.